Hello everyone, welcome to my booktube channel. I will be reading part of Dr. Andrew Quintman's book, The Yogin and the Madman, where he discusses the legacy and textual representations of Milarepa, who is considered to be one of the founders of the Kagyu Tibetan Vajra Buddhist tradition. The century or so following Milarepa's death provided fertile ground for the representation of the yogin's life. Indeed, many of the works surveyed in this chapter may have been composed within a few decades of one another. Donmo Rinpoche's work in about 1245, Sangye Bom's work between 1225 and 1250, the Kagyu Rosary in about 1244, and Gyaltanpa's between 1258 and 1266. This period is set amid the so-called latter diffusion of Buddhism in Tibet, following what is traditionally described as a dark period of religious and social unrest, and recently characterized as both a Tibetan Renaissance and a rebirth of Tibetan culture. The diffusion was also an infusion in which Tibetans used the evolving literature and practices of later esoteric Buddhism as iconic forms and points of reference to reconstruct institutions, found monasteries, and reorganize political realities of central Tibet. This was, according to Tibetan histories, a period in which the shattered was made whole again, when Tibetans knit together their fragmented culture by using the textual and ritual tools provided by Buddhist religious systems of Indian Tantric Buddhism. If Milarepa's nascent biographical tradition took birth and began to coalesce within this socio-religious milieu, it also reflects the period's concerns. Golden Rosary biography collections began to appear, providing tangible links between Indian Tantric adepts and the religious life of Tibetan masters who, like Milarepa, promulgated their doctrinal transmissions. Moreover, the very terms used to describe Tibet's later diffusion are equally germane to, meaning relevant, to Milarepa's early biographical stratum, a stage during which biographers gradually bound together fragmented stories into a skeletal frame using the tools of narrative discourse provided by the dominant biographical works of the time, that is, Golden Rosary texts. These proto-lives and proto-songs were narrative collections supplying foundation and model for later works. So the Songs of Milarepa was worked through many decades, according to Dr. Quintman of Wesleyan University. They served and continued to serve ends both didactic and polemical, but were largely overshadowed by the comprehensive lives they in turn helped to generate. The earliest texts of this type, those of Lama Zhang, and even by extension his source, Gampopa, are rudimentary expressions of a life with little explicit structure or plotting, certainly nothing on the order of a dynamic force shaping narrative discourse. The constitutive stories occasionally illustrate candid moments, the neophyte mistaking lamplight for inner realization, or the yogin exposing his naked body to his sister and mother. But they too are mostly undeveloped and disconnected fragments. Milarepa simply traveled to central Tibet in search of sorcery, studied much sorcery, then returned. He later turned himself into a crystal stupa and then departed into space. Gampopa mentions the yogin's death in a single brief sentence. Lama Zhang forgoes even this reference. Since the arc of liberation is both swift and shallow, these works are of modest didactic value. Their representations maintain their polemical effect, primarily as constituents in the golden rosary of lives that authenticates the collected work they preface. And yet these texts established prototypes for both life and songs, the format implicit in all subsequent lives. Later works of this period would build on these foundations, augmenting the proto-life songs configuration with new literary structure and a sharpened emphasis on narrative detail. The live writing in this stratum matured but did not achieve the fine polish of biographical grain in the later compendia or the standard version centuries later, and the details of the life story were still very much in flux. Retellings were often similar but seldom consistent. Even in their most mature form, proto-works primarily served to promote the legitimacy of transmission, passing from mouth to ear, from teacher to student. Portraiture of individual lives was of less concern than the integrity of the rosary itself. Once again, however, these priorities would transform with the advent of the larger biographical compendia, repositories of Milarepa's great biographical narratives, to which the study now turns.